The opening of Berserk is just as blunt, wild, and aggressive as everything else present in the series. But at the same time, it's perfect at depicting how dedicated Guts is to hunting his enemies down. The first few chapters only exist as a means of helping you understand the character and the way he is now, as well as the violent and tragic nature of the series. The Snake Baron is a fantastic introduction to this, despite only serving as an introductory villain, but what I find interesting is that he's not humanized whatsoever. What I mean is that from the second he's introduced to the moment he's left to burn to his death under a pile of burning houses, Snake Baron is a narcissistic tyrant through and through. He eats the innards of a young child, goes on a monologue about how much he wants to hear bones cracking beneath the hooves of horses. It's impossible to see him as anything more than a disgusting monster, made even more difficult when he actually turns into one. So it's easy to understand how impressed I was when I saw the Count, a man who is so much scarier than the Snake Baron, yet gets a much more intricate and heartfelt story. Something I frankly didn't expect at all, because from the get-go he's treated the exact same, depicted as a dictator who executes anybody he sees as a heretic. Even his own subjects express concern, but he brushes it off, and we finally see his face. He's a fat, ugly man with a god complex who justifies his actions by claiming that it's to keep his people safe and uphold peace, but it's clear that this is a lie, and our hero Guts knows it well. We're already familiar with Berserk's Monster of the Week format by this point, so Miura wastes no time in establishing Guts and his dynamic with the current monster. Within a few pages, he already declares war against the Count by using blood to draw a brand on the face of the decapitated woman, then he uses his own brand to figuratively cut his own neck. It's a simple threat, and it's something that the Count takes delight in as he crushes the woman's head between his fingers. He sends his men to go capture Guts, and this backfires rather horribly with one of the strongest soldiers having his face smashed to pieces. It's a great excuse for Miura to show off his skills in writing manga, with each panel flowing into the next one brilliantly. The constant energy and excitement to emphasize movement is something that Miura is extremely skilled at, and it only gets better as the story goes on. It isn't until the end of the chapter, as well as the volume, that we're introduced to Vargas, a man who takes an interest in Guts due to them having a mutual enemy. And this is where we learn just how cruel the Count really is, discovering that he consumed Vargas' family right before his very eyes. Guts reveals that the Bailet he stole from the Count is a unique item capable of summoning what is known as the God Hand. We see his cold and dark expression displayed beneath their dark silhouette, emphasizing his mysterious history with them very well. Also, if you haven't had enough nightmare fuel, there's a scene where the soldier that gets defeated begs the Count for some more power, and he gives it to him by generating a slug from his mouth that crawls into the soldier's face. It's absolutely terrifying, and the result is interesting. This man, who was once a prideful warrior, now left as nothing but an empty husk, a monster consumed by rage and revenge, who correlates really well with Guts, as indicated by their second battle in Vargas' lair. He's able to contort his body into several tentacles he uses like whips, but Guts is fearless and capable of blocking every blow. The way Miura conveys speed is genuinely awesome, detailing the exciting and forceful motion of every movement very well. Guts defeats him once again, with both him and Vargas fleeing the scene immediately, but the latter is too late, being captured by one of the Count's tentacles and taken to be executed. There's no exception, not even a shred of empathy or guilt for the things that he's done. It's as I said before, right from the get-go, the Count is depicted as nothing more than a tyrant, but it's only in the start of the second volume where the Count starts to become interesting. Not to say that I wasn't already invested, but I didn't expect the turn this series took. Puck gets captured by the Count's men and taken to a castle. The Count's men take the cage he's in to a certain room, one where a little girl named Teresia addresses him as father. She sits in her bed with a tired and somber expression. The Count is not just some low-life monster. It's clear that before he became the weird, parasitic creature he is today, that there was a time he was human. He gives her the elf as a pet, and apologizes for keeping her cooped up in a room like this, stating that he cannot let her roam the streets with all the heretics everywhere. It's ironic that the monster is the one telling his daughter that she's more safe in the confines of his castle than she is in the real world, but it's also clear that she is the only thing that keeps him in touch with his humanity. But that connection is already on thin ice, as she refuses to let him touch her. To Teresia, it's almost as if the Count is a stranger. She hardly recognizes him, and while she feels bad that she's scared of him, she knows that something is wrong. He isn't the man he was when her mother was around, but ever since she disappeared, it's clear that something dark is bubbling up beneath the surface. The Count is clearly distraught upon stepping out of the room, feeling a mixture of anger and sadness. The horrifying look in his face, cast in a dark shadow, displaying his detachment from both his men and his family. He stands on a balcony, looking over at the nearby town, but we don't get to see it. with only his castle in frame. It really emphasizes how alone he feels, and how his huge castle is all he has left. His pain subsides as he realizes that the Black Swordsman is nearby, and has been located by the soldier he infected with his parasite. We're given round 3 against this bastard before Guts finally kills him for good. The art is fantastic, with the horrifying and jagged anatomy of his body completely distorted by the curse he was given. Guts is here to murder every last apostle that took away everything that was important to him. He's drunk on revenge, and strives to kill each of them one by one, until he either dies or emerges victorious. But if this man he's up against is any indicator, it's that the path of revenge will turn you into a hollow, a shadow of your former self. He was once a man who was prideful and had drives and ambitions, but it's Guts who knocks him down a peg. This takes a huge blow to his ego, and settling the score becomes the only thing that drives him, until he becomes a puppet for the Count, a pawn that he honestly expected to die anyway, and only used as a means of locating where Guts is. After struggling, but emerging victorious by beheading the man and smashing the parasitic head against a wall, Guts screams out in rage, prepared to skewer the Count and tear him apart piece by piece. He sees himself in that man, and embraces brutality, prepared to do what needs to be done in order to stop the Count. Speaking of the Count, his daughter named Teresia lets Puck out of his cage. She admits that she knows how it feels to be locked up in a cage. The Count is vicious towards the people he hates, and overprotective towards the people that he loves, but whether it's by killing and eating people as if they were food, or keeping his daughter locked up without any affection outside of giving her worthless gifts and hoping that's enough to earn her respect back, everything he does shows that he's lost touch with his humanity. Like Teresia, it's trapped deep down inside of him. As pretty as this image of her mother being sacrificed is, I think its inclusion is misleading. If a twist is presented by being a lie at first, then there's really no point in showing us a version of the lie as if it did happen. This is something a lot of media do, such as Elfen Lied or The Boys, and it doesn't really sit right with me because it feels like a cheap way to give legitimacy to a lie so that a twist can be more shocking, although I think the disturbing nature of this image shows how distorted the Count's love has truly become. Even if he was a harsh leader in the past, it's clear that something in him changed, and it's affecting Teresia a lot. After a few more incredible pictures of Guts just kicking ass with this giant sword of his, the conversation continues with Teresia asking Puck what it's like to fly. To her, she sees Puck's ability as freedom, something he takes for granted at times, which is important given it's later revealed that he left his home of Elfhelm because he was bored. He takes a look at her room and notices all sorts of things, like a piano, a bunch of stuffed toys, and a painting, but none of these things have any value to someone as young as Teresia. She's more fixated on the small window, longing for the days she can run out and escape. Puck realizes that Guts has broken into the castle and announces that he has to go, but Teresia yells at him, begging him not to leave. It's clear that this girl is so lonely that losing the only connection she's had in the time she's been here physically hurts, but at the same time she scares herself. Her clinginess, her desire to keep him from leaving is too similar to that of her father's. She decides she won't trap him, and lets him leave. Guts makes his way through the castle, fearlessly slaughtering every soldier that gets in his way. Then we finally make it to the battle we've all been waiting for as he steps into the Count's throne room. The beast's transformation is effectively terrifying. It starts with the front of his body morphing from out of the ground in an attempt to attack Guts and take him by surprise, but it doesn't quite work, with Guts blocking the attack easily. What I also found interesting was the choice to switch over to Puck's perspective in order to make the reader feel significantly smaller. This is when you finally see the Count's true form. And even then, you still see him from behind a pillar as if you're hiding from him. One look at his massive size and smug demeanor, and we finally see what he's become. Even if he started as a man, this is what he is now. Ironically, his monstrous thirst for blood ends up being the very thing that sets his daughter free, as if fate itself was trying to punish him for his sins. He shakes the castle around so much that Teresia's door bursts open, and she's given an opportunity to leave, something she feels apprehensive to do until she remembers how envious she was of Puck's wings. It's that freedom she's always desired, and she leaves the dark confines of her prison into the light before her. Guts manages to outsmart the Count by placing his jacket on one of his own men, then slices his face open, but it proves to not be enough. The Count smashes him around ruthlessly, breaking several bones and knocking him to his knees. For a moment, Guts looks absolutely terrified as he realizes what it is he's facing, wondering if maybe he bit off more than he can chew, but it's clear that the only thing keeping him alive is the Count's pure joy in thrashing him around. He loves using his strength to torment others, and seeing the man who has been killing his fellow apostles makes him want to savor this moment just a little longer. But after Puck attempts to steal the Beyblade away from him, Teresia arrives at the scene to see her father and is absolutely horrified at what she's witnessed. Even despite his large, grotesque design, what really sticks out to me is the pure shame in his eyes. She's finally seen him for what he really is, and he blames Puck for it. The pure rage in his eyes, the way he grits his teeth with the intent to kill. He looks so uncanny, yet so natural within the world of Berserk, it is genuinely astounding. Guts stands up, ready to keep fighting even though he was nearly flattened a moment ago. Once Teresia entered the picture, he finally realized that the Count had a weakness. The same weakness that every other apostle has. His humanity. As the Count goes to finish him off, he quickly grabs Teresia as a hostage in order to make him hesitate, then fires his cannon directly into his face. I love that you can see the blast travel up through his body. The impact is so abrasive and cathartic with the detail. It is genuinely one of the most amazing things I've ever seen. Even better yet, he puts the sword in his mouth and uses it to cut the beast's head off, then starts stabbing it viciously as Teresia watches. The tables have turned, and now we watch as Guts laughs, enjoying every second of this while Teresia watches in fear. It's a moment where you're meant to question the intentions of our supposed hero, the man who hunts apostles that abuse their strength to hurt people, purposefully traumatizing a little girl with a smile on his face, and the look of fear and misery in the Count's eyes. The same eyes that were smug, belonging to a man that was drunk with power just moments before. It's as if the art loses its cohesive structure in favor of a more unhinged and detached art style. It's less detailed, more hazy and aggressive, with the shading to truly emphasize how impulsive Guts' actions are. There's no rhyme or reason for why. He's simply venting his anger at the world on a man who deserves it, with no regard for the innocent child that watches him. He took the necessary measures to survive, sure, and that's all Guts has ever known to do, but in this moment, it's as if he's become a monster just like the Count. That's the most interesting thing about Berserk, is that every monster present started as a human, and even human beings themselves can be fucking brutal and terrifying, even if it's for reasons that are easy to understand. Guts is so desperate in this moment of his life to prove that he is cold, a heartless killer that hunts corrupt leaders. But in order to do that, you have to be as aggressive and hateful as they are. If you can't, then you'll never win, because they'll just keep abusing their power over and over again. I'd say he's the medieval equivalent to moral absolutism, a man who defies fate by continuing to hunt and kill what he believes should not exist, valuing survival above all else. But we see the flaw that comes from this, as the Count's blood hits the Beyblade and the world begins to change. Staircases obviously represent an ascent and are often used to put into perspective how those that utilize the Beyblade climb higher and higher. This is partly indicated by the image of Guts running up the staircase in an attempt to reach Griffith, only to be tossed aside as if he were nothing. But also these hectic staircases and their bizarre structure could also symbolize how much his choice to become what he is spun his life out of control. I believe the dimension put in the tornado that appears when the Beyblade is activated tends to be different depending on who is using it. For the Count, it seems to be a series of these same bizarre staircases going in every which direction, but I make this distinction because for Griffith it's a series of weeping faces, which makes sense considering it appears after he gets tortured for a whole year, and it's like the moment he has to overcome his emotional torment from guilt when it comes to sacrificing others for his personal gain. And in that regard, I would say that the Count's fixation on staircases is meant to emphasize his deterioration. Without his family still there for him, he really doesn't have anything to fight for. He is purposeless and lashing out in anger while also slowly losing touch with his humanity. He made the same sacrifice, but it can't be worth it because even though he's able to use his power in disgusting ways, it never leaves him fulfilled. I love the Count as a character because Berserk forces you to acknowledge that he isn't a monster or a psychopath, but a human, one who is just drunk on power that he doesn't deserve. We come to find that Guts has a dark past with one of the God Hand members. Guts writhes in pain at the bottom of the staircase, but Femto always remains at the top, out of reach. Guts is nothing more than a forgotten part of Femto's past. The Count tries to sacrifice Guts in order to gain more power, but the God Hand tells him that he cannot sacrifice enemies, nor can he sacrifice what is already branded. If he truly wishes to become stronger, he must sacrifice a loved one, his own daughter Teresia. He is given the chance to do so, forced to pick between his own survival and the daughter he so desperately wishes to protect. The God Hand shows Teresia the truth he tried to keep concealed from her, that his wife cheated on him, and he sacrificed her because of it. that he was betrayed by the love of his life and chose to kill her in exchange for strength, but it's clear that this decision never left him truly fulfilled. He consumed and murdered countless people because even though his wife was dead, that hatred still lingered. That anger he felt morphed into a desperation for control, and with his newfound powers, he abused them in order to regain the composure he once had. But it never works. The more he hurts people, the further he pushes his daughter away. She's the only thing that kept him from fully embracing the monstrosity he's become, but even in his moment of desperation, as he lies there bleeding and on the brink of death with a look of guilt and shame, he still can't bring himself to do it. Despite all of the horrible things he's done, sacrificing his own daughter was the one line he would never cross, and he pays the price for it. Demons from the astral realm gather and drag him to hell, with Vargas at the top to oversee his punishment. He reaches out to his daughter, who despite everything is visibly distraught to see her father be taken away. Then everything returns back to normal, and Teresia, Puck, and Guts are all brought back to their own dimension. The Count is returned to a human, left as a corpse and not much of one. Teresia cries out in anguish, desperate for escape from this burden, announcing that she'd rather be dead than be here. This is the controversial moment in which Guts tells her to kill herself. This entire exchange is tragic, and it makes you question if Guts is really a hero after what he's done. But while what he says is definitely insensitive, it isn't coming from any place of resentment. She said she wanted to die, and Guts simply told her to do as she pleases. She is no longer a prisoner to her father. She's free from those shackles. It's her own life now, and she can do with it as she wants. If that means dying, then so be it. But on top of that, I think there's a second motivation and reasoning for him saying this. She almost falls, and he instinctively saves her with the very sword that saved his own life countless times, but this gesture only makes her hate him even more, as she realizes that all of this is his fault. He's the one who killed her father, and ever since he showed up, not a single thing has gone right for her. She tells him that she's going to kill him, and he merely walks away with a smug demeanor, telling her that he's ready whenever she is. The thing is that Guts knows there's nothing he can do for her, but revenge has been the one thing that's kept him going through all this hardship and trauma. So if he can become the thing she hates the most, then he accepts that, even though it hurts, because he's been in the same position as her, a lonely, forgotten child that lost everything. He had an effect on her life, and even though his decisions seemed fine in the moment for the sake of his survival, it crushes him knowing that he's torn apart everything, and that there isn't a single thing he can do to make it better. So he leaves with an expression of pure shame. The Count is interesting because when I first read this manga, I genuinely didn't think it'd be possible to humanize a monster this comically awful. He was a cruel and harsh beast that killed people in an attempt to fuel his own desire for control. After his wife had cheated on him, it was as if something in him broke, but all that anger and hatred for the dead truly did was push him away from what little humanity he had left. He is proof that the Bailet cannot rid you of your humanity altogether, because even though he tried his best to push it away, that desire to protect his daughter still remained, even if he overdid it. She was his one weakness, and he couldn't let her be exposed to the public, or he'd sorely regret it. But in the end, she ended up being the main reason he was dragged away. He chose his own life over hers in his final moments. I have no way of knowing if Teresia will ever return, and I highly doubt that she will, but I think her inclusion in the earlier chapters of Berserk is very interesting, as she's the first thing that shows that not even Guts can reject his own humanity. No matter how hard you try to push it away, it will always be there.